Professor of Nutrition and Functional Medicine at the University of Western States. There he works directly with individuals and groups, including professional athletes and military groups, as a nutritional therapist, and he's also a well-known author, chef, and lecturer on the topics of nutrition and functional medicine in Denmark and across the world. I sat down with Umaro at the 2015 CrossFit Games, and in part 1 of this episode, he discussed his story and his general approach to nutrition. Here, in part 2, we'll talk more specifically about his nutrition advice for athletes, as well as for supporting the body while recovering from injury. As always, please remember to subscribe and rate Pursuing Health on iTunes, and share your feedback using hashtag JFHealth on social media. So with that, let's get started with the second part of episode 13 with Umaro Kadagan. So let's talk a little bit more about athletes specifically.
Yeah.
So we talked about just general advice for the general population, making sure you have all those big stones in place, like the sleep, the nutrition, the exercise, stress, some supplements that you might start taking. But if you're really trying to dial it in because you're a high-level athlete, what are some of the additional things that you might start to look at?
Well, for high-level athletes, you definitely want to make sure you don't become carb phobic. You see a lot of people who do very well by reducing their carbohydrates when they're sedentary. They have lots of belly fat, intra-abdominal fat, low lean mass, and they don't. I mean, their metabolism is quite slow, and so they do well on a sort of vegetables and lean meat, fish only diet until they lose weight and they get in better shape. But once you start moving more, I see a lot of elite athletes who actually are underperforming or who can't recover properly because they think I must be on a strict Paleolithic diet or I must be on a ketogenic diet. And once you need to generate lots of energy really quickly, there's no way around glucose. Even if you're keto adapted, fat's just too slow to do anything high intensity. It might work well if you have to run like a triple marathon where it's not speed, but it's just being able to go steadily and having an energy source that you can access constantly because you won't be able to load enough carbohydrates into your system. But when you have CrossFit, you have weightlifting, you have football, soccer, all these things, you definitely want to make sure you're not carb phobic. That it's not an excuse for eating Skittles all day long, drinking lots of soft drinks, but make sure you have potatoes, rice, chickpeas, lentils, all these legumes, these foods that contain starch.
That's great advice.
So it's very simple, but for a lot of athletes, like, whoa, this works really well. Yeah.
Right. So you have to start paying more attention to it.
Exactly.
I think that is great advice, and I've heard that from a number of CrossFitters who started out with eating almost entirely protein and fat and then realized maybe I'll add in some more brown rice or white rice or oatmeal, some other sources of carbohydrates, and they started feeling a lot better.
Yeah. And I see with people who do CrossFit, when initially they start, people and they're out of shape, they do well with the low carb, high plant, high protein, rather than the high fat, do a moderate fat diet. But as I said, once you start getting close to peak performance, fat and proteins are going to be too slow an energy source, even if you have really good metabolism. So you also see the shift people as they get ripped and they get really strong and explosive. They need to start adding more carbohydrates, or they either won't be able to perform, or they won't be able to recover.
And do you recommend that they eat those only post-workout or spread throughout the day?
I think first you should just be very, see what works best. Some people find it best to have them post-workout. Some people find it better to have them pre-workout. Some people do better having them spread out through the day. So what works best for you? There's the research is not that clear. Some people say, "Oh, I have them post-workout. It works wonders." Well, if it works wonders for you, good. Do that.
Keep doing
and
it.
Other people say, "But I feel much better if I have them spread out through the day." Do that. So. We know people are different genetically, physiologically, so it would make sense. You can't do this one size fits all. But certainly I'd say make sure you get some carbohydrates post-workout and sometimes also pre-workout. If people have followed my Instagram, I post quite a few pictures with bananas. And that's because
I've seen those.
I'm on this rampage that people do all these super advanced pre and intra and post-workout things. And usually they don't need them. There might be special instances, or if you do 7 workouts a week, you do multiple training sessions a day, Yes, but for the average person who works out 4 or 5 times a week, they buy all these things. It's like you just need to eat some carbohydrates in the meal before, and then have a banana to replenish your stores. You're fine. That's
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. If it needs to be complex, do it. But if not, don't waste your time on it.
That's great advice.
So certainly that for athletes, and then of course also the other thing for elite athletes, I'd say is making sure that you get enough omega-3 fatty acids, because I meet so many elite athletes who are constantly dealing with inflammation, and inflammation is going to be part of the game when you push yourself hard. That wear and tear, there's no way to avoid inflammation. So it's not a matter of shutting down inflammation, but managing it. And omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D as well is really important, and also getting enough vegetables. So I actually meet quite a few endurance athletes who say, well, vegetables are too bulky, so I'll eat white rice, I'll have all these soft drinks, I'll have all these refined carbohydrates, because I don't, I have to eat enough calories.
Right.
And so vegetables are sort of...
They're missing some micronutrients.
They're missing micronutrients, and so they're constantly suffering from inflammation, or they can't recover properly. And then when we start adding in lots of vegetables, berries, and fruits, sometimes we might have to do a lot of that as juice, because they simply don't have enough gastric volume to eat them on top of getting enough calories and enough carbohydrates and protein. But once they do that, you give the body the tools to manage inflammation. So you want a bit of inflammation post-workout. That's actually what's going to facilitate repair, but also going to facilitate a lot of your adaptations to training. So you get stronger, you get better endurance, your muscles grow. That needs just a bit of inflammation to kick off that process. So if you suppress it completely medically, then you have a problem. You might avoid a bit of pain, but you actually also whittle away at the training response you'll get, or even healing. There are studies emerging, long-term use of anti-inflammatories might save you a bit of pain, but the healing process is slowed down. So whatever tissue damage you have, it'll take you a lot longer to recover from.
Right. So again, eat your vegetables.
Eat vegetables, and then
eat
vegetables, have healthy food, healthy fats. That works, and vitamin D as well, because that's also important for regulating inflammation. And then also probiotics, because if you push yourself really hard, we know that both mental and physiological stress will actually decimate your gut flora.
Yes.
So getting probiotics, there's a lot of research out of Russia on that, and then it's been sort of discounted, in the West. Okay, Russians, crazy people, blah blah blah. We don't, also out of Japan, but it's there and it's really high quality. And it's been looked at for athletes and saying, well, they do better because they have better control of inflammation, they have better nutrient uptake, they have better recovery, their immune system is stronger, so they won't all of a sudden be out with a cold, and then they can't train for 2 weeks, and then they get behind with the plan and so forth.
Right.
So that as well, I think is important. And then like with sports nutrition supplements, there are a few basic things that work really well. So creatine works really well for strength, muscle growth, and explosive power, and it's very well tested. And it's not just for weightlifters or sprinters, like for CrossFit.
Right.
You get lots of things
With
out of creatine.
Lots of explosive,
exactly. You
movements.
get that. And even I say for endurance athletes, sometimes they find that, I actually get a bit of sprint power. So if you can sprint at the end of a marathon, that's important.
And without adding too much weight, I know I've experimented with just smaller doses spread throughout the day and not necessarily using a loading phase.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you don't actually gain much body weight.
No.
But you still get some of the benefit.
Exactly, yeah. So that certainly is a good old classic. Beta-alanine is also quite interesting. It gives you this buffer, so when you're doing high-intensity work, you can go for longer. So, the best studies are in 800-meter runners, and they will take 3-4 seconds off their time.
Wow.
And it's in the second half of the race, so they run it's not that they run faster initially, but after 400 meters, no matter how fit you are, you'll slow down because you accumulate lactic acid and so forth. And if you can sort of offset that just a bit, then you can keep on going for longer before fatigue sets in, or before lactic acidosis slows you down. So 3-4 seconds is quite significant for an 800-meter run. So that's also, and especially if you're looking at CrossFit, where you get all these things where you accumulate lactic acid and you get into fatigue. So that's basic. And then I'll say it's not a supplement, but beetroot juice. If you look at the research on that, it's so and I like it because it's compelling and it's food, which I really like. But the studies, half a liter of beetroot juice a day, just 1 week, and you get 2 to 8% improved oxygen uptake and utilization. That's quite significant.
Yeah.
Or also from the same group, they did time to exhaustion at max intensity. So you can you put them on a treadmill or a Concept 2 rower or a spinning bike, and you have them go right at their anaerobic threshold, right under that, and they have to stay there, which is pretty painful. And then if you give them beetroot juice, half a liter a day for 1 week before, they can go for an additional 90 seconds before they have to tap out.
Wow.
That's,
that's a lot.
1.5
90
minutes.
seconds. Yeah.
So I mean, think of CrossFit or any type of sport. I say that's significant. So that also,
Wow.
is, so they're simple, but they're really effective. Caffeine can be good, but you have to be careful with how often you use it. So it actually works, but only on people who are caffeine naive. So if you drink coffee all the time, have Red Bull, whatever, it's not going to work. But if you're well rested, well fed, good shape, not stressed, then a bit of caffeine can make you perform above above what you do otherwise. So there are studies that are quite compelling, but they're all done on like 22, 20 to 25-year-old students who do, who are like athlete scholarships. They haven't had any caffeine for the week leading up to the study.
Okay.
They're well rested, well fed, and well nourished, not stressed, had enough sleep, and then you give them a couple of cups of coffee or some caffeinated soft drink, and they perform better. But that's just not that many
most
people.
Of the population.
Exactly. Yeah. So and caffeine still might, if you're really tired, it might change your perception of the fatigue. It doesn't really give you energy. It just makes you not feel the fatigue, which like if you were at games, and so you might use that to get through a workout. But when you do it that way, it comes at a price, because you're pushing beyond physiological barriers where your body would normally stop you. And the question is, if you do that all the time, what price do you pay?
Right.
Maybe. It's like the interest rate on that energy loan is going to be quite steep.
Right. You might not want to go there.
No.
Wow. Okay. So that's some great advice for athletes specifically with adding more carbohydrates, and then continuing the same vitamin D, fish oil, probiotics, but also you talked about creatine, beta-alanine, beetroot juice, and possibly caffeine, as long as you're not already very sensitive to it.
That. And then I will say magnesium, although it's it's not a performance enhancer, but I just see a lot of top level athletes who are low on magnesium, because just if you sweat, you lose magnesium as well, and so you lose a lot of magnesium through sweat, and magnesium certainly for cramping, but also for energy production. Magnesium is actually really important, and for sleep and regulating the stress response. So when you're doing something like CrossFit, you want your adrenals to go all out when you're doing your workout or in competition, but then you want them to calm down afterwards. Then you get the best of both worlds, the sort of immediate performance enhancing effects of stress hormones, but you want to shut that down afterwards, or you'll get into trouble. Then they'll start doing damage to your body. So magnesium will help do that. So will omega-3 fatty acids, and that, actually also good old vitamin C is really interesting. So I've seen a few athletes so far. I was thinking they should have had vitamin C before, and especially after workout. Some of the athletes who basically tapped out during the Murph.
Okay, right.
I would say if I were their nutrition performance coach, then I would put them on vitamin C after an episode like that, because you can see that vitamin C enhances recovery after severe physiological stress.
Wow, that's great advice. Well, I hope some of those girls are getting vitamin C right now.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's actually a great segue, because I want to talk a little bit more about nutrition for recovery.
Yeah.
So we talked after I ruptured my Achilles and had surgery, and you gave me some great tips to try to speed my recovery, and vitamin C was one of those, because it's obviously going to help with tendon repair.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit more about your approach to recovery?
Yeah, from an injury.
Just from in general, some sort of musculoskeletal injury.
Yeah. Well, so for recovery, we want to make sure that we manage inflammation, not suppress it. Okay. Also, we don't want it out of control, because then it's like a bonfire out of control, so you just keep on doing damage. But if possible, you want to avoid long-term use of anti-inflammatories. You can use them immediately to take some of the immediate pain, but otherwise they might actually interfere with healing. So you want to make sure that you have the nutrients necessary for healing, and vitamin C becomes really crucial here, because vitamin C is so important in the formation of new collagen. So vitamin C helps you make strong but supple collagen. So almost think like you have cables of steel that are highly flexible. That's what you want your collagen to be like, with your tendons and ligaments. So vitamin C is important for that. And vitamin C helps regulate inflammation as well. And then actually hydrolyzed collagen makes sense. There's not a lot of research, but there's some research, because you use it for making tendons, ligaments, and also cartilage. A lot of people, like if they tear an Achilles tendon, full or partial rupture, they'll think, well, glucosamine must be good because it helps with osteoarthritis of the knee. But glucosamine only seems to work for elbows and knees specifically, not when and that's for the cartilage and the joint, but
right.
when you've torn a tendon, it's the physiology is a bit different. So what seems the best bet would actually be to do hydrolyzed collagen.